There's a book most people haven't read that quietly changes how you understand yourself. It's called The Primordial Emotions, The Dawning of Consciousness, published in 2006 by Derek Denton, an Australian neuroscientist who spent decades studying instinct, salt appetite, and the deep biology of what makes an organism feel anything at all. And the core idea is disarmingly simple. But once you actually sit with it, it rearranges everything. Here it is. Consciousness didn't begin with thinking. It began with thirst. Not metaphorical thirst. Literal, physiological, body screaming for water thirst. Hunger. The panic of not getting enough air. Pain. Fatigue. Sexual arousal. These raw, unavoidable states of the body, Denton calls them primordial emotions, and he argues they are the birthplace of subjective experience itself. Before language, before memory, before you could construct a single thought about your life, there was already a me embedded in the feeling of needing water. That's a profound claim. Most theories of consciousness start at the top, with cognition, with scene building, with the ability to reflect. Denton flips it. He says, no. First came feeling. First came the body, knowing something matters, right now, to me. And from that ancient seed, everything else grew. Now here's where it gets interesting, and where it starts to matter for how you actually live. Denton draws a clean line between two kinds of emotion. On one side, you have the primordial ones: thirst, hunger, pain, air hunger, fatigue. These are driven by interoceptors, the internal sensors that monitor what's happening inside your body. They arise from the oldest parts of the brain, the medulla, the midbrain, the hypothalamus. They are non-negotiable. You don't decide to be thirsty. You don't narrate your way into pain. They just arrive, and they carry with them an absolute demand. Deal with this now. On the other side, you have what Denton calls the classic emotions. Fear in the psychological sense, anger, jealousy, pride, shame, hope, anxiety about something specific. These are different animals entirely. They depend on interpretation. They require a story. He disrespected me. That's anger. This might fail. That's anxiety. I missed my chance. That's regret. None of these exist without memory, prediction, and a narrative framework that gives them meaning. And here's the formula that clarifies everything. Primordial emotion equals bodily signal. Classic emotion equals bodily signal plus story. That one distinction, body versus body plus narrative, is quietly one of the most useful ideas you can carry through life. Now, the Stoics didn't have neuroscience. They didn't have brain imaging or interoceptor theory. But they had something else. Ruthless, phenomenological clarity. They could sit with their own experience and see what was actually happening. Take Epictetus. It is not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things. That statement only makes sense if you're already distinguishing raw sensation from mental interpretation. And that's exactly what the Stoics were doing 2,000 years before Denton put it in scientific language. Stoicism never tells you to stop feeling pain. That would be absurd. It never tells you to ignore hunger or pretend fatigue doesn't exist. What it targets, with surgical precision, is the layer on top. The resentment about pain, the fear about hunger, the shame about desire, the anxiety about what might happen next. In Denton's terms, Stoicism accepts primordial emotions as facts of nature and disciplines classic emotions as cognitive constructions. Epictetus frames life around two forces: orexis, desire, and eklesis, aversion. At the primordial level, Desire is hunger, thirst, rest, sex. Aversion is pain, suffocation, injury. These are biological vectors. They're not you being weak, they're you being alive. But at the classic level, desire becomes status, approval, the image of freedom, the right life. And aversion becomes humiliation, regret, being ordinary, being trapped, not physically, but symbolically. The Stoic move is not to suppress desire, it's to discipline where desire attaches. Want only what is up to you. That's Epictetus again, which is really another way of saying, don't confuse classic desire for primordial necessity. Buddhism arrives at nearly the same place through completely different language. In the early teachings, suffering, dukkha, arises from tanha, craving. But here's the subtlety most people miss. Buddhism does not deny primordial sensations. Monks eat, they sleep, they avoid pain. What Buddhism targets is craving for continuation, craving for identity, craving for a particular story about who you are and how things should unfold. Primordial discomfort is allowed. Classic narrative attachment is the poison. And this is exactly what meditation reveals when you actually do it long enough. Meditation isn't about calm. It's about resolution, seeing what's actually there with enough clarity to notice the layers. Say you're sitting and thirst arises. At first, the mind floods in. This is annoying. I shouldn't be distracted. I'm failing at this. That's classic emotion layered with narrative. But if you stay, if you don't move, don't react, just observe, something shifts. You start to feel the raw thing underneath. Pressure in the throat, a dry sensation, a pulsing urge. That's the primordial emotion, naked, without story. And here's the insight that experienced meditators eventually hit, the one that changes everything. The suffering isn't in the sensation, it's in the resistance and the story wrapped around it. This maps exactly onto Denton's split, and it converges with exactly what the Stoics were saying. Pain is the cost. Suffering is arguing with the cost. But now comes the harder question, the one that actually keeps you up at night. If classic emotions are stories layered on bodily signals, and if so much of what I feel is interpretation, not reality, then who am I? What's left when you strip the stories away? Is identity itself just a narrative? This is where most people get confused, because the answer is partly yes and partly no. There are 3 layers, not one. The first layer is the organism, your temperament, your energy levels, your sensitivity, your curiosity, your risk tolerance, your libido. This is not a story. This is biology plus early wiring. You don't choose it, you discover it. And this is why you can't convince yourself to love what you don't love, or feel fulfilled by what deadens you. This layer is real, non-negotiable, in the way primordial emotions are non-negotiable. The second layer is what I'd call the chooser, the pre-narrative self. There is preference before justification, attraction before explanation, aversion before ideology. You feel drawn to depth, to openness, to intensity, to honesty over comfort. And that preference exists before you narrate it. This is what people mean, usually poorly, by true self. It's not verbal, it's directional. It's the felt sense of what matters before you can explain why. The third layer is the story. I am this kind of person. My life should look like this. This choice means that. Stories give coherence. They allow long-term action. They enable meaning. But, and this is crucial, stories are maps, not territory. They are tools, not identities. So how do you tell what's you versus what's narrative? Here's the test, and you can use it ruthlessly. If you drop the story, and the preference remains, it's you. If you drop the story, and the preference dissolves, it was narrative all along. But then someone will ask, and it's a good question, isn't the story still mine? Isn't the whole point of authenticity that I choose this story and not that one? Yes. And here's the correction most people miss. Authenticity is not believing your story. Authenticity is authoring it consciously. Most people are possessed by their stories. They don't choose them. They inherit them from parents, culture, fear, unexamined assumptions. The person who asks, which story serves my organism and my values? And which story turns my temperament into self-betrayal? That person is not being inauthentic. That person is doing the adult work of authorship. You don't find yourself by stripping all stories away forever. You also don't become yourself by clinging to one story until it suffocates you. You oscillate. Drop the story. Feel the organism. Feel the organism. Choose your values. Choose your values. Write a story that fits. Live it. And when it no longer fits, revise it without lying to yourself about what you need. That loop never ends. That's not a failure. That's being alive. And this brings us to what might be the hardest part: living with irreversible choices. Because some doors close forever. That's not pessimism. That's adulthood. The question isn't, can I keep all lives open? No one can. The question is, how do I metabolize closure? And here, Stoicism and Buddhism converge one final time. Resentment forms when you secretly believe you are entitled to more lives than one. But no human is, not even the adventurous ones. Loss is inevitable. Injustice is optional. Pain is the cost. Suffering is arguing with the cost. From Epictetus, wish for events to happen as they do, not as you want. From the Buddhist tradition, suffering arises from clinging to how things should have unfolded. You can honor the cost without narrating yourself as a victim. Here's something practical. When regret surfaces, and it will, try this. Name the closed door explicitly. I will never live that life. Then name what you chose. I chose this commitment. And then say to yourself, literally, this is the price. I accept it. Not positive thinking, closure hygiene. Without it, regret leaks into everything. So here's the frame that holds it all together. You are not your story. You are not your impulses. You are not your regrets or your imagined alternatives. You are a conscious organism with a temperament, capable of choosing values, authoring stories that fit those values, and revising them without lying to yourself about what you need. Authenticity is not expression. Authenticity is alignment. A meaningful life is not one without loss. It's one where loss is paid knowingly, without self-contempt. The primordial emotions, thirst, hunger, pain, they were the first flicker of consciousness on this planet. The first time matter felt something, and from that ancient feeling, everything followed. The classic emotions, the stories, the identities, the philosophies, the agonizing over whether this life is the right one. But the body knew first. Before the story, before the judgment, before the anxiety, the body knew. The Stoic sage and the experienced meditator and the honest person sitting alone at night all converge on the same point. Feel everything. Obey nothing blindly. Act deliberately. That's not detachment from life. That's adult consciousness. And it starts where it always started, with the body and what it's trying to tell you, before you wrap it in a story.